The laughter echoed through the brightly lit hospital hallway just after sunrise, blending with the beeping monitors and rolling carts as though humiliation had become part of the building's daily routine. Every morning, the same exhausted man walked through those automatic doors carrying two things that seemed equally heavy: a faded backpack filled with his little daughter's school supplies and a heart full of memories he never spoke about. To everyone around him, he was simply another overworked nurse, a quiet single father who always volunteered for the hardest shifts and never complained. They had no idea that beneath the ordinary scrubs stood a man whose courage had once changed the course of impossible missions. They certainly never imagined that before the sun reached its highest point, a roaring Navy helicopter would descend onto the hospital grounds, and armed military personnel would rush inside demanding that their missing SEAL legend be returned immediately. If you believe kindness is stronger than judgment and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel name. Your support helps inspiring stories like this reach more hearts around the world. Every person at Ridgeway Memorial believed they understood who Rowan Mercer was. They saw a man in his late 30s with tired eyes, worn sneakers, and neatly pressed navy blue scrubs that had clearly survived countless shifts. They noticed how he quietly cleaned patient rooms after others walked away, how he skipped lunch so newer nurses could rest first, and how he rushed from work every afternoon to pick up his 8-year-old daughter, Maris, before the daycare closed. Many admired his dedication, but admiration rarely spoke louder than gossip. Some physicians whispered that Rowan lacked ambition because he had never gone to medical school. Others joked that he acted too calm during emergencies, calling him strangely robotic. A few even laughed openly, wondering why such an intelligent man seemed satisfied with being just a nurse. Rowan never defended himself. He simply smiled politely, returned to work, and kept carrying burdens no one else could see. The truth was hidden behind photographs stored in a small wooden box beneath his bed. Inside rested faded military medals, mission patches, and one weathered picture showing a much younger Rowan standing beside a rescue helicopter with several teammates whose faces carried the unmistakable confidence of elite warriors. Those photographs belonged to another lifetime, one that ended the day he received a folded American flag instead of the woman he loved. His wife, Alina Mercer, had served as a military trauma surgeon attached to special operations units. She possessed extraordinary compassion and limitless courage, but an overseas humanitarian mission ended in tragedy when an unexpected attack claimed her life while she shielded injured civilians. Rowan returned home carrying grief heavier than any combat gear he had ever worn. He resigned from military service shortly afterward, refusing interviews, declining medals, and disappearing into civilian life with only one purpose remaining: to become the father Maris deserved. Parenthood became Rowan's greatest mission. Every morning began before dawn. He braided Maris's hair after watching dozens of online tutorials because Alina had always done it effortlessly. He packed cheerful lunches decorated with handwritten notes reminding her that bravery sometimes meant simply being kind. He hurried to work before sunrise, completed 12-hour shifts, attended school events whenever possible, and spent late evenings helping with homework before washing uniforms long after his daughter had fallen asleep. Exhaustion became permanent, but regret never entered his heart. Maris laughed often, dreamed boldly, and never doubted she was deeply loved. That was enough for Rowan. Unfortunately, kindness is often invisible to people who mistake silence for weakness. One particularly busy weekday morning, the emergency department overflowed with accident victims after a multi-vehicle highway collision. Doctors barked orders while nurses raced between trauma bays. Rowan calmly organized blood supplies, stabilized frightened patients, and anticipated medical needs with remarkable precision. His movements seemed almost instinctive, allowing the department to function despite overwhelming chaos. Yet when the immediate crisis passed, several physicians gathered near the nurses' station, chuckling about how Rowan acted like he commanded the entire hospital. They joked that perhaps he imagined himself some forgotten action hero. Rowan heard every word while quietly restocking medical equipment only a few feet away. He lowered his eyes and continued working, unwilling to waste energy proving strangers wrong. What none of them understood was that Rowan's composure had been forged under circumstances far more terrifying than crowded hospital hallways. Years earlier he had crawled through hostile territory carrying wounded teammates while enemy fire lit the night sky. He had learned to make impossible decisions within seconds because hesitation meant lives would be lost. Compared to battlefields, emergency rooms felt almost peaceful. Saving lives had simply changed uniforms. That same afternoon, Maris arrived unexpectedly at the hospital after her school's art program ended early. She waited quietly in the pediatric lounge, coloring cheerful pictures while her father finished his shift. Many children would have complained about spending hours inside a hospital, but Maris enjoyed watching nurses comfort frightened patients. She often whispered that her father possessed the gentlest hands in the world because they always made hurting people smile. Rowan treasured those words more than every medal locked beneath his bed. Just before noon, an unusual vibration shook the hospital windows. At first everyone assumed another storm approached, but the growing thunder outside sounded mechanical rather than natural. Conversations stopped. Patients turned toward the windows. Staff members hurried into the parking lot where powerful rotor blades churned the warm daylight air into swirling clouds of dust. A dark Navy helicopter descended onto the emergency landing zone with astonishing urgency. Its arrival was so unexpected that security officers froze before rushing toward the aircraft. The helicopter doors opened before the blades completely slowed. Several uniformed personnel stepped onto the pavement with disciplined precision, followed by a decorated naval commander whose expression carried unmistakable determination. Without hesitation, the group marched directly through the emergency entrance. Hospital employees instinctively cleared a path as whispers spread through every corridor. Nobody understood why active military personnel had arrived without warning. The commander ignored the reception desk entirely. His eyes searched the bustling hallway until they rested on Rowan Mercer, who was calmly helping an elderly patient adjust a blanket. For the first time in years, Rowan's composed expression changed. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by quiet concern. Around him, doctors exchanged confused glances, still unable to comprehend why elite military officers seemed interested in an ordinary nurse. The commander stopped only a few feet away and rendered a crisp salute that stunned everyone watching. His voice carried across the silent hallway with unmistakable respect. He announced that Chief Petty Officer Rowan Mercer, retired Navy SEAL combat medic, was urgently requested under direct operational authority. A classified humanitarian rescue mission had unfolded overseas after a devastating coastal earthquake isolated hundreds of civilians and medical volunteers. Communications had failed, transportation routes had collapsed, and several experienced combat medics familiar with disaster extraction had become unavailable. Rowan's unmatched experience coordinating battlefield medicine, helicopter evacuations, and civilian rescue operations made him uniquely qualified. Time was running out. The hallway remained silent for several breathtaking seconds. The same physicians who had mocked Rowan only hours earlier stared in disbelief. Their jokes dissolved beneath overwhelming embarrassment as fragments of forgotten military history suddenly aligned with everything they had misunderstood. His calmness during emergencies. His flawless medical instincts. His refusal to seek recognition. None of it had been arrogance. It had been experience purchased through unimaginable sacrifice. Rowan lowered his eyes toward Maris, who had quietly walked into the hallway after hearing the helicopter. She looked from the decorated officers to her father with innocent confusion. Until that moment, she knew only that her father had once worked in the military. She had never understood the depth of his service because Rowan believed children deserved peaceful dreams rather than stories of war. Emotion filled his heart more fiercely than any battlefield fear he had ever known. Years earlier he would have accepted such a mission without hesitation. Now every decision passed through one question alone. What was best for his daughter? The commander seemed to understand that silent struggle. He explained that the mission would focus entirely on humanitarian rescue rather than combat. Families remain trapped beneath damaged infrastructure while volunteer medical teams desperately fought to keep survivors alive. They needed leadership, experience, and compassion as much as tactical skill. Rowan listened quietly, his gaze never leaving Maris. She stepped forward, wrapped both arms around her father's waist, and looked up with unwavering trust. She reminded him of the lesson written inside every lunchbox note he packed for her. Bravery sometimes meant simply being kind. Those simple words broke something open inside Rowan's heart. He realized that protecting his daughter did not always mean shielding her from sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest lesson a parent could teach was that compassion demanded courage, even when fear begged someone to stay home. Arrangements were made within minutes. Maris would remain with Alina's older sister, who lived nearby and loved the little girl as though she were her own. Before Rowan departed, several nurses gathered around him with tears in their eyes. Many admitted they had never known his story because he had never once mentioned medals, missions, or extraordinary accomplishments. Rowan simply smiled gently and reminded them that every nurse who comforted frightened patients performed acts of courage every single day, even without helicopters or headlines. The mission lasted 11 exhausting days. Working among collapsed buildings, flooded villages, and overcrowded field hospitals, Rowan coordinated helicopter evacuations, treated critically injured children, trained exhausted volunteers, and inspired frightened survivors who believed hope had disappeared forever. His decades of medical experience blended perfectly with the leadership skills forged during military service. Lives that seemed impossible to save slowly became stories of survival. International news outlets briefly mentioned an anonymous retired combat medic whose leadership transformed rescue operations, but Rowan declined every interview. Recognition had never motivated him. Returning home to Maris remained the only reward he desired. When the helicopter finally landed back at Ridgeway Memorial under the bright afternoon sun, hospital employees lined the entrance without being asked. Doctors, nurses, custodians, receptionists, and patients stood shoulder to shoulder as Rowan walked toward the building carrying nothing except the same faded backpack he had left with days earlier. One physician who had laughed the loudest stepped forward with visible emotion. Pride had disappeared from his face, replaced by sincere humility. He admitted that he had judged Rowan by a uniform instead of a character, by a job title instead of a lifetime of service. Rowan accepted the apology with quiet grace because bitterness had never healed anyone. From that day forward, respect spread through the hospital in ways policies never could. Younger nurses sought Rowan's mentorship. Physicians invited his perspective during difficult trauma cases. Administrators established emergency response training based upon techniques he willingly shared. Yet despite every new honor, Rowan's favorite moment remained exactly the same each evening, walking hand in hand with Maris beneath the golden daylight sky as they headed home together. Years later, patients rarely remembered which doctor signed paperwork or who carried the highest title. They remembered the gentle nurse who never hurried frightened families, who always knelt to comfort scared children, and who somehow made every person feel seen. They remembered the father who proved strength could wear kindness instead of pride. They remembered the day a Navy helicopter arrived looking for a forgotten hero, only to reveal that the greatest victory of his life had never happened on a battlefield at all. It happened every single morning when he chose love over recognition, service over applause, and fatherhood over every medal he had ever earned. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to channel name, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your support allows more inspiring stories of courage, kindness, and hope to reach people who may need them today. Special request: before you go, comment below with the words, "True heroes stay humble." We'd love to know where you're watching from and what part of Rowan's journey moved you the most. As the evening sun painted the hospital windows with warm golden light, Rowan lifted Maris into his arms, smiling with the peaceful confidence of a man who no longer needed anyone to know who he had once been. The world had finally discovered the warrior hidden beneath the nurse's uniform, but the little girl resting safely against his shoulder had always known the truth. To her, he had never been a legend, a seal, or a hero from forgotten missions. He had simply been Dad, and in the end, that was the greatest title he would ever carry.